to our next episode of A Tale of Two Economies. And I have my friend and colleague, Mark Anileski, with me here. And Mark and I have been talking about debt slavery and the curse of usury and debt trap forever. And this is the work that Mark has been doing for about 40 years now. And I've also started what I call Soulidarity economy is about that, out of our benevolence, we look after those who are not too capable of looking after themselves. And in that, I also talk about benevolent loans, which is interest-free loans. But let's hear from Mark, and Mark will also share with us about the concept of Jubilee from the Christian perspective. So over to you, Mark. Welcome.
Thanks, Anika. That's, the whole issue of usury has been my obsession since I was in Jerusalem in 1992, I guess, or before that, because I would study the monetary. I was part of the economic monetary reform economists in Canada, and I was always intrigued with, why is the keep growing, and then realized, it's because the debt money continues to grow exponentially as more loans are created. The total amount of debt never gets repaid if you look at the statistics, and you say, isn't that interesting? And then when I looked at the US data, I realized, the US total debt, all debt, is doubles every 7 to 8 years. Isn't that interesting? Since World War II. So then when I discovered the work of economic historian Michael Hudson in the US, he was writing about the economic history of ancient civilizations. Going back, I thought the Jubilee concept, the forgiveness of debts, was a Jewish concept, ancient Jewish concept. But in that teaching from their exile in Babylon. And then Michael Hudson's point has been that no, those teachings originate in Samaria, Mesopotamia, and so what's it called, the Harabini laws, which so the Sumerians, who were probably good mathematicians, what Michael's saying is they learned by observing cattle. How do cattle herds progress? And so they saw that if we didn't, the progression of debt as money, what debt was okay, but the extent that and the creation of money would be maintained by the priests, right, and through the monarch as a blessing, but that every 7 years, Sumerians said, we would have a clean slate. In other words, we would wipe out all the debts that were created in part for only those who got into trouble. Sometimes a farmer would have a few bad years and needed financial support, but the Sumerians understood that it would make no sense to have debt bondage or people in debt for generations, because what's the point of that? They needed them in a time of war to fight for the empire or whatever, and so this notion of every 7 years debts were wiped out through clean slate, which later became known as Jubilee for the Jews. Then the question is, how long ago was it ever practiced? And Michael points out, actually, at least 2,000 years, it's not been even addressed either by the Greeks or the Romans. Julius Caesar tried to do it. He tried to cancel debts, but he was assassinated on March 15th, Ides of March, because the money guys, right, the senators, those who had most to lose by forgiving debts of average people would threaten their power. So we have not seen any notion of Jubilee or conversation about clean slate for a very, very long time. And so here we are
Yeah,
after.
and why we are discussing this today is what triggered for me was that, as you know, I've come back from Italy, the summer school for economy of Franciscan. Students were there, and we are discussing about how to this new economic thinking, which is coming out of the social narrative and spiritual capital of, Abrahamic faiths or even other faiths as well, faith traditions. And we're trying to, Pope Francis also talks about, the soul of the economy and purifying economy. And I kept on thinking, and then I heard this news about Pakistan, that the economy is about to collapse because IMF has these conditions on.
Yeah.
And that just triggered me, especially thinking it's all good to talk about these things and, philosophy and theology, but in practice, what is happening around us? And as you said, the tradition of Jubilee has been in practice for over 2,000 years now. So in current day and age, and this scenario, what do you see? Like, how can we get out of this trap now? Or is there any hope for humanity?
I mean, I think that the short answer is it appears that we are so hell-bent on maintaining the system, partly because of ignorance of not just economists, but all of us as to like what is money. And we've talked about that. So we're capable of creating a new system. We're capable of creating a brand new, start with a clean slate. I mean, if I was the world leader, if I had actually, absolute control, it's all wiped out. Every computer, every debt is wiped. And what are we going to do? And I think one of the things we've talked about too is, it was at Bretton Woods that John Maynard Keynes said, I think we should have each nation should have a resource-backed currency, right? And he lost that argument to the Americans, who said, no, we want control we want hegemonic control of the global money system, and we'll exercise that through the IMF and the World Bank, which are de facto, arms of the government, right? Or arms of the money power. So I don't see any, unless we mature and wake up and have the Bretton Woods moment. And I don't know how I don't know what would lead to such a cataclysmic, for years I've said, it's just a matter of time till mathematically the system starts to actually implode and unravel. And they will do several things. Either they'll start to raise interest rates, right? They create inflation. All of these things are artificial. These are all with our eyes wide open. If you look at the system, you say all of these things are either by design, collapse to force us all into a global digital currency structure, which is not Jubilee. It's more of a slave system than what we have. Yeah. Because at least now you say, the banks have the power to create all the money. It's like true, but at least in an ecosystem of diversity, right? It's still a healthy ecosystem. So that's the question. A war in Ukraine or wherever is not gonna lead us to the table, another Bretton Woods conversation. No. So when is this ever going to happen? It's not going to happen unless the whole world apparently is in flames and we're all on our knees going, wait a minute. We wake up on Monday and go, we created the system. We can design a better system. Yeah. And my point is, people like Michael Hudson and even myself, I'm not special. We never get invited to talk about it on mainstream media.
Yeah. You see, the thing is, when people like you and we say these things, we are actually being, disregarded by, I get this, people say it's too idealistic, it's too philosophical. And I say, unless we start seeing things anew, and in a different light, we're never going to
Right.
change anything, because we're still very egocentric in that way, that, you know, it's all about, oh no, but how do I make business? How do we make money from money?
Right.
As you know, that is what debt is about. You're making money, from loans.
That's right.
And which is in major faith traditions, this has been
It's all there,
prohibited.
and you go like,
Yeah,
that's
it's
why
actually it's sinful, right? It was a
it's
sin.
sinful. And I
Yeah.
blame, I blame the Catholic Church. I blame my own church for being silent since 1840, when the Pope
Mm.
said, I don't know how to express about, I'll defer to my economic consultants. And it's been silent ever since.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like this teaching of Jubilee, do you think it only applied to the Israelites, to Moses only? No, I
Mm.
think it applied to all of us.
Right.
And it's ridiculous that so only the Jews, it only applies to Jews. No, it doesn't. And then the Catholic just like, well, if Jews can be the money lenders, we'll let them go be sinful and we'll be virtuous. And like, no, this is a moral virtue issue, right?
That's it.
And
Yeah.
who's going to stand up in the, whether it's the World Council of Churches or whatever, I don't care where it is, and say, this is ridiculous. This is unacceptable.
Mm.
It's contrary to the creation
Command.
spirit to
Yeah.
love, to like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so this is like, no, we're insane that
Mm.
we're stubborn, right?
We are very stubborn, because it's so strange that you said that the world will be, you know, up in flames or whatever, but I feel like we are better off than previously. How the history of our world or civilization, it's just this scarcity mindset we can't get rid of, and see
Yeah,
abundance everywhere, because look,
e-
we have more
exactly.
abundance now than ever before,
Yeah.
right?
That's the point, right? It's like if the Sumerians could watch cattle and the progression of a herd and base their money system on that, why can't we? We have more science today probably than back then. We know the Fibonacci, we know all this fancy stuff, and
Yes.
yet we don't mimic nature in our money systems. Like, I don't get it. It just
Yeah, yeah. And we are supposedly more evolved now as human race,
yeah.
because I mean, that just, it baffles me so much. But I think this is the what the jihad is, what we say in the, yeah, jihad is the struggle. It's basically struggle against evilness in ourselves, firstly, not out there, but in our inner selves. And unless we work, you know, together on this, I mean, you and I can keep saying these things, and it's
No, I mean,
getting
I
nowhere.
and I have to jump on this little interview about well-being indicators, but I'll leave one word, last line from Thomas Jefferson, who he said, without virtue, happiness cannot be.
Mm.
And I'm like, wow, that's a powerful line. What is virtue? Whoever talks about virtue, the characteristics of goodness, of good behavior, let alone happiness, well-being of the soul, like without virtue, happiness cannot be. Like,
Mm.
that's it to me. It's like we don't examine our conscience,
No.
either collectively, individually,
Mm.
against virtue. And I would have my business students do an analysis of virtue. I said, come back next class and tell me what you learned. Oh my goodness, all these religions have similar virtues. I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting?
Mm. Mm. And what is virtue all about is the well-being of human soul, human self. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, goodness,
Isn't
beauty.
Genesis,
Mm.
God said, it is good. Okay, I'm done. It's all good.
Mm.
Like, what are we doing if not celebrating the goodness of,
That's it.
anyways? So, no, I
Thanks,
think
Mark. We'll continue talking about this debt
we
slave
will.
and debt trap. That's it. That's our jihad, our common
No,
jihad.
you're right. I learned that too. Jihad is to struggle, and and life is struggle. To keep aligned with virtue is a struggle.
Yeah.
It takes work, right?
Struggle with your ego first, the
Yeah,
false self. Yeah.
And an honesty and recognition of the system we have now is not only an injustice, it's an affront to God because of God's loving abundance. Look, I shower you with abundance, and you create scarcity systems that are anathema to me. And I like, and no comment that, you know, look at the US, nobody's talking about this in the US.
No, no. But
anyway,
we'll keep talking about this.
We will.
Till it lands somewhere. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Anika.
Bye-bye.